Hey there, I'm Miska and welcome to HitScan. Lately, around the launch of Valorant, there's definitely been an influx of new players that have not tried the beta nor played any Counter-Strike before and are really just picking up Valorant for their first time. So I wanted to compile a quick list of things I wish I knew when I started playing Valorant. And for me, these go back into Counter-Strike as well, so it's kind of like when I started playing Counter-Strike, as some of those mechanics definitely carry over. So I hope that these sort of short principles and tips and tricks kind of help you improve, going from either completely new or fairly new to these types of tech shooters to feeling pretty experienced fairly quickly. Let's begin. First up, and you can talk about this one for a while, we've got perspective. It sounds boring, but it's so crucial to every single engagement that you have. The short version is this: when you're in a 1v1 versus someone and you're both standing and looking at the same corner, then the person that's standing further away from that corner has an advantage due to perspective. If you're standing really close to this corner and you're just seeing a really small angle, that person that's looking at you from the other side of that corner, standing further back, might already be seeing half of your body before you can even see any of them. Here's what that looks like in game, standing closer versus further away from a wall, and what that kind of does for you, how much you can see of a person, and how important that is in an engagement. We'll get back to this in some of the later tips here as well, but this is something you really need to keep in mind. You do not want to be standing really close to a wall like this when you go around a corner, as you'll be showing your character model before you can see theirs and shoot them. There's really not too much more to say about the basics here, but you can talk about this forever, so let's move on. Next up, try to use W less and A and D more. Now, I know obviously you can't avoid using W entirely, it's pretty much impossible. You can't just be moving sideways the entire time. However, when you are holding down W and you're running or moving forward, it's much more difficult for you to quickly stop or to adjust your aim properly as a result of just holding W. Using A and D more to strafe lets you adjust your aim more properly when rounding a corner, and also makes you more difficult to hit if someone else is peeking out, as if you're running directly towards someone, they don't really have to move their mouse much, but if you're running side to side and they miss that first shot, they will have to adjust horizontally with their aim. A and D can also allow you to stop a little bit quicker, as you can counter strafe. If you're just holding down A to move left and then you're pressing D quickly, you'll stop very quickly, versus just holding W, it's harder to hit S to stop faster. But really, it's just good practice in most FPS games out there to not hold down W the entire time, as you really need to stop, aim and shoot. Less W, more A and D. And combining these previous two around perspective and AD strafing, we've got peeking corners without holding shift, so you AD strafe out instead. This is incredibly important and will be the difference between you losing gunfights or winning gunfights way more consistently. Here's what I'm talking about in action. So first off, you want to be standing not too close to the corner, as if you're shift walking around a close corner, you're not just shift walking around it and giving the enemy more time to see you and then shoot you and react to you being there before you can even see them, but you're also standing closer to the wall, that perspective thing we talked about, so you'll be showing yourself before you can even see them. Instead, stand further back from that wall, AD strafe out, don't hold shift, and you'll have a much more fair fight where you are also knowing when you're peeking and you're moving out quickly by just pressing A or D, not holding shift. If you would normally be walking out instead of running out, you might be thinking that holding shift to stay quiet and just walking is actually a good advantage, and this is where a lot of people will have to just get used to AD strafing out without making noise. If you AD strafe out without holding shift, there's a short window where you can move out a bit and move back without making any noise at all. You don't have to be holding shift, you don't have to be walking, no, nothing there. There's just a certain amount you can move with WASD without making any noise. Just get into the practice range a little bit, listen to your own footsteps, and learn how far you can A or D strafe out from a corner without making any noise. Back up from the wall a little bit, combine all these things I've said previously, and just stop holding shift when you go around that corner, and you'll have a much better time peeking someone and catching them off guard, rather than sneaking out, showing your body before you can even see them. Next up, a bit more of a fun one rather than just these very fundamental principles of a tac shooter. We've got keeping your classic pistol after you've bought another pistol. This is something that I think is actually really important when you're buying certain weapons. For example, if you're picking up a shorty. It's probably the most prominent sidearm where you will also want to have something that has a bit of range to it. Shorty is usually an all-in, try to just get a pick on a pistol round or an eco round type of gun. I think in some cases it's actually pretty undervalued. And normally when you're buying a shorty and you've got your classic as well, if you put your classic pistol on the floor and you got the shorty out, when the round starts, that gun will despawn. Instead, if you buy a shorty, you throw the shorty on the floor and then you get yourself a new classic for free, and you're holding the classic pistol and got the shorty on the ground, then when the round starts, your shorty will not despawn, allowing you to swap gun there and then have both the classic and the shorty available to you. Here's what that would look like in action. As you can see, I've got my shorty out and I'm waiting around this corner for a kill, and I drop my classic just behind me here at the start of the round. This allows me to get those 2 shots out with the shorty, get that kill, back up and throw my shorty away, pick up the classic, have it immediately be reloaded, and get another kill. Now in this particular situation, it's very quick and it's very fast, and it's not gonna be this clear cut every time you need to do this, but it's still useful that every time you do buy a shorty or you feel like it might be useful, you can keep both guns by just doing this. Just drop the gun you bought on the floor and keep the classic in your hands and it won't despawn. Beware though, once you drop guns on the floor in Valorant, you cannot sell them. The next tip or thing I kind of wish I knew when I started playing are just the basic callouts. I was lucky to learn the basics of Counter-Strike with a bunch of different friends, that some of which had already pre-existing knowledge of how CS worked and how the callouts worked and generally the base principles of the game. But I've been seeing a lot of threads on Reddit lately where people have been firing up Valorant for the very first time and people have started shouting things at them. Eco round, heaven, CT, and they just don't really know what's going on or what any of these words mean. So here's a quick little basic need to know callouts chart. First up, if you're confused, frag just means kill, basically. If you got 30 frags in a game, you got 30 kills. Frags is not really used in many other games than Counter-Strike, so I figured I'd just clarify that. On top of this, we've got eco round, which means economy round, aka just saving a bit of money to try and have more money for the round afterwards. If someone says, let's eco, they're going for an economy round, so they're trying to save some money. CT is referring to the counter-terrorist spawn in Counter-Strike, which is the defending side spawn. In Valorant, CT just means defender spawn. And in the same way, T just means the attacker spawn, as that's the terrorist side in Counter-Strike. CT, defender spawn, T, attacker spawn. We also got the classics of heaven and hell, which I hear called out quite a bit. This is just referring to a high ground, heaven, and a low ground, hell, usually next to each other or around the same sort of site. With the people I play with, if we take for example A on Haven, we've got heaven, the window, and hell, the garage underneath. That's usually what I refer to them as, but some people just call this garage and window. There's loads of different callouts that different circles of friends will use and things like that, but there's just a quick example. If there's any other ones you think people should know, then put them in the comments below. Just say, here's some more basic callouts, and then list the ones you think are useful for people to know that are more general ones. And finally in this video, something that's a little bit of a bonus. I quickly wanted to address baiting. This is something that also is very prominent and talked about a lot in Counter-Strike and definitely carries over to Valorant. Baiting generally refers to when you are putting a teammate of yours in front of you or in a dangerous situation because you don't want to be in that situation and want to benefit off of them potentially dying. Basically using your teammate as bait. On attacking side, that can mean stopping to let your teammate go in front and sort of take the hit before you try and peek that enemy. Now, sometimes this can be good because you are setting up for trading those kills. If that's what you're doing, great. You know what you're doing, you know the risk of going into it, you know that the teammate in front might die and that you have to follow up. But sometimes this is definitely done without that person in front really knowing, thinking that they're going in with their teammate. In a similar way, if you're already holding a corner and you let your teammate walk into it and you don't really try and support them at all. Let's say I walked around this corner and died right here where I'm shooting, and my teammate knew there was an enemy around but just didn't really say anything and wanted me to walk into that. That could also be considered baiting. On the defending side, let's say that you're holding split B site and one of your teammates say that they are holding B heaven to keep an eye on any enemies going there and that they've got an eye on that angle, and you're sitting looking at garage. You'd expect people to be shot at if they are up in heaven. If enemies would appear up in heaven, they'd be shot by that teammate of yours that's just called out heaven. This is when we get into the sort of second part of baiting, which has to do with holding active versus passive angles. In this case, this Cypher next to this zipline right here is holding a passive angle, as he can't really see into heaven. He can only really see if someone pushes out of heaven. Holding a passive angle there for your teammate and calling that you are holding heaven could also lead to a misunderstanding, which might even be heading into the territory of also baiting your teammate. Just make sure you're clear to your teammates when you've actually got an angle versus when you're just holding an angle passively. It's more of a shooter etiquette thing, but yeah, don't bait your teammates, or if you do, then just make sure that both of you know about it. Alright, that's all for this time. Thank you guys very much for watching. These are things that I wish I knew when I started Valorant, or in my case also Counter-Strike. Like I said, if there's anything else, drop it down in the comments for people to learn, and if you got any questions about any of these things in particular, we can dive deeper into those in a separate video. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.